1/4 of critical infrastructure in the U.S. is now at risk of flooding, and that's according to a new report which highlights the flood risk to utilities, airports, shipping ports, and emergency services such as police, fire, hospital, running the gamut. Jeremy Porter of First Street Foundation is joining us now to break it all down, along with Yahoo Finance's Karina Mitchell once again. Jeremy, this is fascinating. We've seen so many pockets of the U.S. under pressure from various risks. You have on the West Coast fire risk, and on the East Coast, especially the Southeast, flooding risk. What are their findings in this report?
Yeah, well, this report is the third report in a series of reports that we've produced. The first, where we were interested in property risk specifically. The second, we were primarily interested in economic damages as a sort of a tangible way to understand that risk. And then this third report is really focused on community risk, so giving a more holistic understanding of what risk looks like for any given property, but also for the larger communities. And as you mentioned, we focused on residential properties to this point. We know that the risk for residential properties is larger than what we would have understood just from our public-facing federal FEMA maps. But this was actually surprising to us in the sense that we found that critical infrastructure and roads, for instance, were at a higher risk than even residential properties.
And Mr. Porter, your report was really fascinating. It was eye-opening. I wonder if you could share with us, just for people that haven't read it, where are the biggest geographical risks right now? And how quickly is that map growing? And the reason why I ask that is here in New York, we just dealt with catastrophic flooding, right, from Hurricane Ida. And so, our transit system sort of overwhelmed. There were 100 deaths. That's something that New Yorkers don't typically expect to see, but they do now.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's 2 points here. One, the first is that risk is high where you'd expect it to be high in a lot of places. So the Florida Gulf Coast, Louisiana, in places where we typically associate high risk occurrence of flooding and that have historically been impacted by hurricanes and tropical storms. But another thing that really was interesting to us, which is something we found consistently in our flood reports, is the fact that inland around Appalachia and all the way up in New England, we're seeing a lot of risk that was previously unknown because of the ways in which our current understanding of flood risk are informed. We understand in those locations, risk is primarily driven by heavy precipitation. And as the climate changes moving into the future, the warming atmosphere, the warming sea surface temperatures are actually fueling tropical cyclones so that they're stronger. And because they're stronger, they're moving slower as they move further north. But at the same time, they're able to keep their strength further latitudinally. So they're reaching New York, they're reaching southern New England, they're reaching Virginia at a rate that they haven't in the past. And when we look at our analysis, we're seeing the normal spots that have high flood risk, but looking into the future, we're starting to see a lot of areas that we traditionally would not have associated with having high flood risk become more and more at risk of flooding.
And I have to echo Karina's surprise there living in the city. I'm actually from Miami, so I've seen catastrophic flooding firsthand many times over. But you have a handle on the data here on the problem, and that's the first step. I'm wondering then, what is the solution and how long is this going to take?
Yeah, our mission at the First Street Foundation is really to quantify and communicate flood risk. There's a lot of this data that exists out in the world. The problem is it's not easily accessible. So our goal is to take this data, make it easily accessible, and then to give people, homeowners, community leaders, the information that they need to make the best decisions. Clearly, there's a lot more risk than what we originally had thought. And there are a lot of smart decisions that can be made based on having the proper data. Up until this point, a lot of individual property owners and a lot of small communities haven't had access to high quality flood risk information. So while we are in a sort of a changing environment, we're seeing more flood risk. We're only going to see that grow into the future. Is more and more important now than ever to make sure we have the proper data to make decisions off of.
And sir, tell me, what does a price tag look like to fix this problem? Because it is just so immense, right? And does President Biden's infrastructure bill, whether it's $3 billion, whether it's $2 trillion, does that even start to make a dent in the problem? What is the immediate challenge that needs to be addressed? Only a couple of seconds left.
Yeah, that's the $1 trillion question, right? But we've created the data. We understand the economic damage implications for property owners. we haven't gone as far as quantifying the impact on infrastructure economically. So Biden's bill could certainly help in a lot of these places. But again, our stance is that we create the best data available and allow the experts to make decisions with that data.
Price tag unknown. Jeremy, thank you for coming here. As always, Jeremy Porter, First Street Foundation.